The world's second wealthiest country, Japan, once seemed poised to overtake America, but its failure to recover from the economic collapse of the early 1990s was unprecedented, and today it confronts an array of disturbing social trends. Japan has the highest suicide rate and lowest birth rate of all industrialized countries, and a rising incidence of untreated cases of depression. Equally troubling are the more than 1 million young men who shut themselves in their rooms, withdrawing from society, and the growing numbers of parasite singles, the name given to single women who refuse to leave home, marry, or bear children. The People's Republic of China, many countries in the eurozone, and the United States may face similar problems in the future, and they have been concerned by Japan's long-term recession. Japan has achieved the highest life expectancy in the world, but its retirement age is still 65 years of age. The aging population and the diminishing workforce are one of the biggest causes of long-term recession in Japan. On the other hand, Japan's method of calculating wages is based on seniority. Seniority-based wages system makes it difficult for companies to hire elderly people. They are often forced to retire, even though many of them would like to continue working. Because of the aging population, social welfare costs have started to increase, and currently 1/3 of government spending is allocated to this, while the government budget deficit is rising every year. It was a brutal knife attack in May 2019, in which the perpetrator was a man in his 50s who had been out of work for many years and living with relatives. A month after the attack, the government unveiled plans to help those who were shut out of the labor market in their 20s to land full-time positions, with a goal of assisting 300,000 over 3 years. Japan has an estimated 613,000 middle-aged hikikomori, a term usually used to describe socially withdrawn adolescents who hole up in their bedrooms, according to the results of a government survey released in March of the last year. Among those in their early 40s, as many as 1 in 3 said they had become shut-ins because they had trouble finding or settling into a job after finishing school. Japan's equity and real estate bubbles burst to start in the fall of 1989. Equity values plunged 60% from late 1989 to August 1992, while land values dropped throughout the 1990s, falling an incredible 70% by 2001. As a result, from 1991 to 2003, the Japanese economy, as measured by GDP, grew only 1.14% annually, well below that of other industrialized nations. It is generally acknowledged that the Bank of Japan, BOJ, Japan's central bank, made several mistakes that may have added and prolonged the negative effects of the bursting of the equity and real estate bubbles. For example, monetary policy was stop and go, concern about rising prices called inflation, and soaring asset prices. The Bank of Japan put the brakes on the money supply in the late 1980s, which may have contributed to the bursting of the equity bubble. About 16% of total government spending is allocated to total governments, making it the second largest government expense after Social Security. Local governments rely too heavily on central government transfers and do not make efforts to revitalize regional economies. In addition, a rigid distribution system within agriculture cooperatives has put farmers in a weak position, and they are unable to make innovations in agricultural production. Japan's oversized construction industry is at the center of the country's problems. The sheer scale of this sector is astounding. As a percentage of the GDP, construction investment constitutes 18.2% of the Japanese economy compared to less than half that in the United States. It has run out of beneficial projects to undertake and proceeds with projects of questionable value. The public works sector of the economy has succeeded in encasing 55% of Japan's coastline in concrete and damming up 97% of its rivers. Japan is literally building the road to nowhere. Bureaucratic momentum has kept these massive expenditures in place. While nearly all politicians realize the cost these public works place on the nation as a whole, no local official is willing to give up his slice of pork. Indeed, the economies of many rural communities depend almost entirely on government largesse. After the bubble burst, Japan's monetary policy was over-tightened, drastically reducing the lending capacity of Japanese banks. Ravankar and Yoshino, 2008, estimated Japan's loan supply function for the periods 1982 to 1989 and 1990 to 1995. Japan's long-term recession is often explained as a liquidity trap. Much attention has been focused on monetary policy rather than structural issues. But the problem of the Japanese economy was in its vertical IS curve. The private investment did not grow despite very low interest rates. Expected future rates of return were low, and so hardly any new technological progress was made in Japan. Japan's difficulties have parallels in the American economy. The US government spent millions creating large-scale low-income housing projects in the 60s. The Department of Housing and Urban Development was notoriously unsuccessful, however, at creating workable neighborhoods. Similarly, the massive transformation of the American professional sports infrastructure over the past decade has often resulted in beautiful new facilities. Surrounded by acres of barren parking lots, it is easier to build a shining stadium than the comfortable sports bar on the corner. The failure of Japan's economy to revive despite massive capital spendings also casts doubt on the ability of Keynesian fiscal policy to revive a stagnant economy. Market-oriented economists have long argued that fiscal stimulus is doomed to failure over an extended period, since expansionary fiscal policy must be financed by the sale of government bonds. This borrowing naturally drains money from private capital markets, thus government borrowing crowds out private investment. Indeed, while outsiders may gasp at the absurdly low nominal interest rates in Japan, the official interest rate is a minuscule 0.1%. When combined with widespread deflation, real interest rates in Japan are actually quite high. In October 2020, then Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide declared that Japan would reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, an extremely high hurdle for the country to achieve in just 30 years. Japan is among the world's largest carbon emitters, with 40% of its emissions coming from energy production. In 2019, fossil fuels composed 88% of the country's total primary energy supplies. Overhauling the country's energy production systems is thus an integral part of the government of Japan's GOJ plan to achieve carbon neutrality. However, the GOJ faces an uphill battle in restarting and expanding nuclear. Unsafe systems and regulations destroyed most of the Japanese public's trust in nuclear energy, and for good reason. Nobody outside of academia or who understands either economics or history would ever prescribe compulsory wealth redistribution, central planning, massive tax hikes, or burdensome bureaucracy as a cure for anything, let alone a half-dead economy that would simply kill the remaining half. The fact is that Japan's post-war progress owes more to the ideas of Adam Smith and Milton Friedman than to those of John Kenneth Galbraith and Paul Krugman. Moreover, the bursting of the bubble showed that Japan's era of high-speed growth was over. The economy wasn't growing by double digits, and so the stock market and other asset markets could not keep growing at double-digit rates. Japan was now a mature economy and could aspire to sustain only single-digit growth. A market economy does not only mean an economy that has moved many of its workers from industrial and post-industrial jobs, but also means an economy with an aging population. An aging population is terrible for consumption. Older consumers defer new expenditures. And while retired workers have spent their lives paying into things like government pensions and health plans, once they've retired, they are a net drag on those plans, pulling money out instead of putting new money into the system. Looking back on the decades since the bubble burst, one key lesson is that anomie and diffuse discontent aren't conducive to economic growth and consumer confidence. Let us know your opinion about these disturbing social trends in Japan in the comments section below, and do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.